Hello, my friend. It is so good to have you here with me today. Grab your favorite warm drink and let us just sit down for a real talk. I have never made a video quite like this before. Usually, I am here sharing my experiences to help you find peace with your money, but today, I am actually coming to you as a friend who needs a little bit of your perspective. I found myself in a financial situation that has been making me think a lot lately. It is not a massive crisis or anything like that. It is actually what people would call a very good problem to have, but it is causing some friction in my mind, and it goes against the simplicity I always try to cultivate. I even asked some artificial intelligence tools for a few answers, but the suggestions felt a bit cold and robotic. They did not really capture the human side of how I want to manage my life and my comfort. So, I thought I would bring it to you, my online family, because you always have such grounded, wise perspectives. Let me paint the picture for you so you can see exactly where I am standing. Back when I retired at the beginning of 2019, the world looked very different for savers. If you wanted to put your money anywhere safe, like a standard bond or a fixed income account, you were getting less than 1%. It was honestly so painful to see. Your hard-earned savings were basically paying nothing, and they were definitely not keeping up with the rising cost of living. Because of that, I really did not want to leave a lot of my wealth tied up in those traditional safe havens. Now, you should also know that I have a very strong personal bias toward equities and stocks throughout my entire working career. Whenever I had regular income flowing in, I kept my head down and invested 100% into equity funds. That felt natural to me, and it gave me the growth I needed over the long haul. So, when 2019 came around and I had to build a retirement income plan, I decided to use a strategy with three different buckets. Bucket number one was my short-term safety money, the cash I would actually use to pay for my life. My goal back then was to keep 3 years' worth of living expenses in this bucket. To be clear, this was 3 years of net expenses, which means it only covered what my portfolio needed to provide after counting other income. For instance, if I needed $50,000 a year to live, but I had $20,000 coming in from some deferred compensation, I only needed $30,000 from my actual savings. So, my bucket one would ideally hold 3 times that $30,000, which is $90,000. Right now, I keep that kind of money in a very simple Fidelity money market fund. But during those very first few years of my retirement, I found myself constantly chasing returns in that safe bucket. I spent so much energy looking for the best certificates of deposit, buying Series I savings bonds, and juggling different individual bonds. Looking back, it was honestly a bit of a messy situation that brought a lot of administrative effort for very little real impact on my life. It just created mental clutter, which is the exact opposite of what retirement should be. But for the sake of our story, just imagine bucket one as 3 years of safe fixed assets. Then, I created bucket number two. This was money that I thought I might need down the road, specifically for years 4, 5, and 6 of my retirement. Remember, back then, I did not have any income from this YouTube channel. I was just living off what I had built because I absolutely hated the idea of getting less than 1% in a standard bank account. I decided to lean into some slightly conservative investment funds for this middle bucket. I put half of this money into a balanced fund, something similar to a traditional 60-40 allocation of stocks and bonds. The other half went into a fund focused entirely on companies that pay steady dividends. I generally do not like to recommend specific fund names on this channel because everyone needs something different. So let us just keep it general at the time. This middle ground felt really comfortable to me. It was not perfectly fixed, but it leaned heavily towards stability while still giving me a little bit of a cushion. Then finally, there was bucket number 3. This bucket was completely dedicated to long-term growth, meaning it was 100% invested in equities. That was the setup I started with, and it felt like a sensible way to navigate a world where safe cash paid nothing. Well, let us fast forward to right now in May of 2026. Life has changed, the markets have shifted, and my current financial picture looks quite different. In bucket number 1, which is my safety cash, I now have 10 years worth of living expenses. That might sound like a lot to some people, but it was a very deliberate choice I made by design to give myself ultimate peace of mind. Again, this is net of my current income sources. I still have that deferred compensation for another 4 years. I have a small pension, and I also have the income that comes from this beautiful YouTube community. About half of this 10-year cash cushion is in that Fidelity money market fund, which has been earning around 4.63% lately. That is significantly better than the 1% I was getting years ago, and it actually beats inflation nicely. I love the ease of it because I can transfer that money to my checking account within 24 to 48 hours whenever I need to buy groceries or pay a bill. The other half of my safety money is in a steady bond fund inside my individual retirement account. Over the past year, that bond fund has returned about 5.44%. I have not always been in this specific fund. Of course, I made sure to stay out of bond funds during the rough patches of 2022 when a lot of people took a 15% haircut on their fixed income. I waited and stepped back into bonds at the very start of 2024, which worked out beautifully. So my safety bucket is incredibly simple right now, just a money market fund and a bond fund. But then we look at bucket number 2, and this is where our little puzzle begins. Let us just say, for example, that this middle bucket has grown to about $400,000. Because it has been invested since 2019, its original cost basis is only $200,000. That means half of that total value is pure, unearned capital gains. The balanced fund and the dividend fund have achieved annual growth rates of 11% and 9% since I bought them. Looking back, the experiment I started in 2019 worked out spectacularly well. In fact, it worked a bit too well. I created that middle bucket simply because I was running away from the terrible interest rates of the past. It paid off nicely, and I certainly have no regrets about the wealth it created, but it has left me with an investment that no longer has a clear purpose in my life. You see, my long-term growth bucket. Bucket number 3 is also doing fantastic. It is fully invested in equities, with 90% of it in a traditional retirement account and 10% in a tax-free retirement account. I always want to shift more money into that tax-free account, but the market has been on such a wild upward tear that the main account keeps growing faster than I can move things around. So here is the core issue with that middle bucket. I am currently just reinvesting all the dividends and the interest it generates. I do not actually need to spend that money because my YouTube income and other sources cover my daily life. But because this is held in a regular taxable brokerage account, it creates a constant tax drag. Every single time the funds rebalance or pay out a distribution, I have to pay taxes on it, even though I am not using the cash. If I sit down and look at my life right now, this middle bucket does not really fit anywhere. My first bucket gives me 10 full years of absolute safety, and my third bucket gives me all the equity growth I could ever want. Those two pieces are all I really need to feel secure and content. This middle bucket is just a leftover holdover from a time when cash paid nothing. It is a wonderful problem, and I am not complaining at all. But as a person who loves to streamline and simplify life, I find myself wondering what the best next step is. If I simply sell the whole thing and buy a broad equity fund like the standard index that tracks the top 500 companies, I will immediately trigger a $200,000 capital gain. I really do not want to hand a massive chunk of that over to the government all at once if I do not have to. So, I have been sitting on my porch, drinking my coffee, and sketching out 4 possible paths we could take. None of them are perfect, and none of them are terrible. The first option is to simply stop automatically reinvesting those dividends and interest payments. Instead of letting that cash go back into the balanced fund, I could use it to manually buy a clean, low-cost index fund in my brokerage account. That would slowly shift the balance of my wealth into pure equities over time, and it would slightly lower the future tax drag. It is a gentle step in the right direction, but it moves at a very slow pace. The second option is to keep the funds exactly as they are and use them to seed a donor-advised fund for charity. My wife and I love to give back to causes we care about during our lives, and we also want to leave a meaningful legacy behind us. By contributing these highly appreciated funds directly to a charitable account, we could completely wipe out the capital gains tax issue altogether. Now, it is true that a balanced fund might not grow quite as fast as a pure stock index fund would over the next 20 years, but if you want to avoid a big tax bill while doing some real good in the world, this is a beautiful path to consider. The third option is to just bite the bullet, sell the middle bucket, and pay the capital gains taxes along with any extra investment taxes that come with it. We could just do it, get it over with, and clear the mental space. We could even break this down into smaller steps, like selling a piece of it this year, a piece next year, or spreading it out over 5 years to keep ourselves in a lower tax bracket. It might be the cleanest way to fully transition to a simple 2-bucket system. Then, there is the fourth option, which is to simply do nothing and choose to be happy with what we have. The returns on this middle bucket are genuinely lovely, averaging around 10% across the board since I started. There is absolutely nothing to feel bad about when an investment is growing like that. It is a very comfortable, steady place for wealth to sit. So those are the 4 paths I see in front of me right now. I would genuinely love to know what you think about this. Which of these paths feels the most peaceful to you? Or even better, Is there a fifth option that I am completely missing because I am too close to the situation? I ended up here because a plan I made years ago succeeded far beyond my wildest dreams, which is a beautiful reminder of how time and patience work in our favor. But now I am left trying to balance financial efficiency with mental clarity. Some people might look at the economy and say that if the central bank decides to lower interest rates again in the future, I might be very glad to have a steady dividend-paying balanced fund in my corner. Maybe that middle ground is exactly the buffer we need between absolute safety and total market growth. That line of thinking definitely falls under the category of just being happy, smiling, and enjoying the fruits of our labor. Money is just a tool to help us live a life that feels calm, spacious, and grounded. I would love to read your wisdom and your ideas down in the comments below. Thank you for being here with me, for listening, and for always being such a supportive part of this journey. Take care of yourself, breathe easy, and I will talk to you very soon.